Hey everyone. Tonight we're not starting in a trench or a prison camp. We're starting inside a steel box. The walls cold to your touch. The air thick with fuel, oil, and cordite. Outside, the battlefield is hunting you. Inside, every movement reminds you that you're sitting on tons of ammunition and enough gasoline to turn the whole crew into a funeral pyre in seconds. You are a German tanker in World War II, the so-called spearhead of Blitzkrieg, armed with a machine that can crush cities, but that will crush you just as easily. From the burning deserts of North Africa to the frozen killing grounds of the Eastern Front, your tank is both your weapon and your coffin, and the war doesn't care which role it plays first. So before you get comfortable, like and subscribe, and tell me if you had to choose. Would you rather roast in the desert sun or freeze in a Russian winter now? Climb in beside me, seal the hatch, and let's find out what it was terrifyingly like to be a German tanker in WWII. You are there, in the early dawn, a cold metallic scent in the air, a whisper of fuel and the fainter, sweet smell of fresh oil clinging to the steel plates around you. This is Poland. 1939, or perhaps France. 1940. You are young, perhaps barely into your 20s, and the world outside is a blur of motion. The engine rumbles beneath your seat, a living beast humming with contained power, shaking the very bones of the machine that holds you. Your comrades, just inches away yet separated by the cacophony of the tank, are shadows in the dim light, their faces illuminated only by the faint glow of instruments or the occasional flick of a flashlight beam. You are a part of something new, something that moves with incredible speed, a spearhead. They call it Blitzkrieg. The doctrine of lightning war is not just a concept. It is a physical sensation. You feel it in the way the tank lurches forward, then smoothly pivots, responding to the commands of your driver. You feel it in the rush of air when the hatches are briefly opened. A fleeting glimpse of the countryside rushing past, blurring into a tapestry of green fields and distant towns. The ground trembles not just from your own tank's passage, but from the dozens, perhaps hundreds, of other armored giants thundering alongside you. It is a symphony of steel and fire, a relentless advance that seems to sweep all before it. In these initial campaigns, there is an almost intoxicating sense of invincibility. Your Panzer III or IV, with its thick armor and rapid-firing gun, feels like an extension of your own will. The enemy's defenses seem to melt away before your relentless push. You hear the sharp, metallic clang of their small-caliber shells glancing harmlessly off your sloped armor. A sound that, at first, might make your heart skip a beat, but soon settles into a reassuring rhythm, a confirmation of your machine's strength. There is a primal thrill in this, a sense of being at the very tip of an unstoppable force. You are a hunter, and the world outside is your prey. Yet, even amidst the exhilaration of rapid victory, a chilling realization begins to creep in. The swiftness of your advance, while overwhelming for the enemy, does not eliminate danger. You see the black plumes of smoke rising on the horizon, the silent, stark monuments to tanks that did not make it through the initial thrust. You hear the frantic shouts over the intercom when a comrade's vehicle takes a direct hit. The sudden silence that follows more profound than any explosion. These are not just machines burning. They are steel coffins, trapping men you shared a laugh with only hours before. The initial overconfidence, a comforting shroud, begins to fray at the edges, revealing the raw, undeniable fear that pulses just beneath the surface. Each lurch, Each distant crack of a shell reminds you that you are not merely observing the war from within this armored shell. You are inextricably bound to it, a part of its terrible, grinding mechanics. The world outside may be a blur, but the world inside, with its confined spaces and the constant drone of the engine, becomes a universe of its own, a universe where survival is measured in inches and seconds. And as the sun sets on another day of advance, painting the sky in fiery hues, you are left with the quiet knowledge that even steel can be broken, and the spearhead, sharp as it is, can shatter. The initial campaigns, for all their dizzying success, were also a crucible of harsh lessons. Your Panzer IV, the one you had come to trust with your life, was originally designed for a different kind of war. Its short-barreled 75mm gun, while effective for blasting infantry positions and clearing defensive obstacles, was never truly intended for dueling other armored beasts. You remember the training, the emphasis on supporting the foot soldiers, on breaking through lines, not on hunting fellow steel monsters. It was a comfortable role, a familiar rhythm of fire and advance, a dance with the infantry. Then came the stark, chilling encounters that shattered that comfortable illusion. You remember the first time you faced a French Char B-1 Biz, or later, on the vast plains of the East, a Soviet T-34 or a monstrous KV-1. Their shapes loomed in your periscope, larger, more imposing than anything you had been told to expect. Your first shot, a confident bark from your gun, would strike their armor with a sickening thud, a metallic groan that reverberated through your tank. But instead of the satisfying explosion, the geyser of smoke and flame, there was only the dull impact, followed by the sight of the enemy tank continuing its implacable advance, seemingly unharmed. It was a cold, bitter shock that ran through the crew. A sudden, stark realization of vulnerability. Your shells, the ones you had trusted, seemed to bounce off their hides like pebbles. The enemy's guns, however, possessed a terrifying new punch. You heard the deep, resonant clang of their rounds hitting your own armor, the sudden shudder of the entire vehicle, the spray of molten metal from inside the impact zone, known chillingly as spalling. You were no longer the hunter. For a terrifying moment, you were the hunted. The whispers began, then grew into urgent demands. The high command, seemingly just as surprised as you were, recognized the desperate need for change. You heard the rumblings of a new order from the very top, from Hitler himself, the Panzer IV. Your trusted steed would be reborn. Its relatively short, infantry support gun was to be replaced, upgraded, lengthened. It would receive a new, high-velocity 75mm cannon, a weapon designed to penetrate, to tear through the thickest armor the enemy could muster. It was a monumental shift, a forced evolution driven by the cold, unforgiving realities of the battlefield. And so, your role changed, profoundly and irrevocably. The comfortable routine of infantry support faded into memory. Now, you were tasked with a new, far more dangerous mission to seek out and destroy enemy armor. The tank, once a tool for breakthrough, became a dedicated weapon for tank-on-tank combat. You began to study the weak points of the enemy, the precise angles to aim for, the telltale sounds of their engines, the subtle movements that betrayed their intentions. The training became more focused, more intense, centered on quick acquisition, precise aiming, and rapid firing. The weight of this new responsibility settled upon you, a heavy cloak of expectation. The metallic scent of gunpowder lingered more often in the air inside your steel box. Each shot fired from the new, longer barrel vibrated through the chassis with a sharper, more violent tremor. You felt the raw power of it, the potential for destruction it now held. But with that power came an even greater sense of dread. You were no longer just a spearhead. You were a duelist, entering an arena where the stakes were always life and death. The silent, almost imperceptible shift in the Panzer IV's role echoed a deeper, more profound change within you. The overconfidence of the early days was replaced by a grim determination, a hardened resolve. You knew, with a certainty that chilled you to the bone, that the next encounter might be your last. The roar of the upgraded engine, the distinct sound of the new, longer gun loading, became the soundtrack to your new reality, a haunting melody of power and profound danger. The world outside had forced your steel cocoon to adapt, and in doing so, it had irrevocably changed the landscape of your own inner world, leaving you forever marked by the weight of its transformation. The landscape shifts dramatically. The familiar greens and grays of Europe replaced by an endless expanse of ochre and burnt umber. You are transferred, along with the rest of your unit, to the unforgiving sands of North Africa, under the command of the legendary Rommel and his Africa Corps. The very air is different here, thick with fine dust and an oppressive, bone-drying heat. The moment you step outside your tank, the sun beats down with an intensity you've never known, a searing hammer blow that threatens to buckle your knees. This is a furnace, and your tank, a massive steel shell, becomes a literal oven. Life inside the Panzer, under the relentless African sun, is a constant battle against the elements, the metal walls. Even with their thick paint, absorb the sun's energy, radiating it inward until the interior becomes an inferno. The temperature inside can easily climb past 120 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes soaring to an unimaginable 140 degrees. The air is thick, stifling, and utterly still, heavy with the stench of sweat, hot metal, and exhaust fumes. Every touch of an internal surface, from the gun breech to the transmission housing, feels like placing your hand on a searing hot stove. You learn to wear gloves, even in this heat, a thin barrier against the burning steel. Dehydration becomes a constant companion, a nagging thirst that never fully leaves you. Water rations are meager, and every sip is savored, a precious commodity in this parched land. Your uniform, soaked with sweat, dries stiff with salt, chafing your skin. Your lips crack and bleed. Your eyes sting from the dust. The sand, ever present, infiltrates everything. It coats your tongue, grinds between your teeth, and whispers its way into every crevice of your tank. It jams the delicate mechanisms of your machine guns, clogs the air filters of the powerful Maybach engine, and grinds away at gears, turning smooth movements into grating struggles. A sandstorm, when it hits, is a living nightmare, reducing visibility to zero, coating you and your machine in a fine, abrasive powder that feels like ground glass. Yet, amidst this brutal environment, battles are fought, and for a time, a strange sense of mastery returns. You are at places like Kasserine Pass, facing American Grant tanks and the ubiquitous Shermans. These American tanks, while sturdy, often carry their ammunition in less protected areas, and their armor, though thick in places, sometimes proves vulnerable to the high-velocity 75mm gun of your upgraded Panzer IV. There are moments, flashes of combat clarity, when your gunner, sweating profusely but focused, sends shell after shell thudding into the enemy, seeing them explode in satisfying blossoms of fire and smoke. In these intense, exhilarating moments, despite the searing heat, despite the dust in your eyes, you feel a surge of invincibility. You are the superior force, a predator in this sun-baked arena. The desert, however, has its own insidious ways of breaking a machine. And a man. The heat saps your strength, clouding your judgment. The endless, featureless landscape makes navigation a challenge, every dune looking much like the last. The sun bakes your mind, blurring the edges of reality. You witness tanks, not destroyed by enemy fire, but simply breaking down under the stress of the heat and sand, abandoned, becoming burning coffins of another sort under the relentless sun. The quiet dread, the deep knowing of your tank's dual nature, persists. This steel box, designed to protect, becomes a crucible, slowly cooking the life out of you, even when no enemy shell finds its mark. And as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the desert sky in hues of orange and violet, the metal of your tank finally begins to cool. But the memory of its burning embrace and the ever-present threat of becoming a fiery tomb lingers, a silent companion in the vast, indifferent desert night. Just as you adjusted to the searing heat of Africa, the world shifts again, dramatically and brutally. The arid plains are replaced by vast, sprawling forests and endless, flat steppes. The blazing sun gives way to a biting, unforgiving cold. You are deployed to the Eastern Front, a theater of war so immense, so relentless, that it defies comprehension. This is where the true meat grinder of the Panzer arm operates, where fully 75% of all German tank losses would occur. The scale of the conflict here is staggering, the enemy seemingly infinite. The very air itself becomes an adversary. Temperatures plummet to unimaginable lows, often dropping to 40 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, sometimes even lower. Inside your tank, the cold is a constant, gnawing presence. Every breath is a cloud of vapor. Every piece of metal is an icy trap for your bare skin. Your hands, even in thick gloves, ache with a deep, persistent chill. Starting the engine in these conditions becomes a monumental task. Fuel thickens to molasses, oil congeals, and the mighty Maybach engine, usually so eager to roar to life, groans and resists. You resort to desperate measures, building small fires beneath the engine compartment, carefully, cautiously, hoping to warm the oil enough to get the pistons moving. The danger of an uncontrolled blaze, igniting the fuel, is ever present. A silent tension as you watch the flames lick at the cold steel. It is a slow, agonizing process. Each morning a fresh battle against the tyranny of the cold. A constant reminder of how fragile your mechanical behemoth truly is against the might of nature. And then there are the endless waves, the Soviet forces, seemingly undeterred by their own colossal losses, attack with a terrifying, almost relentless fury. You face not just tanks, but endless streams of infantry, swarms of cavalry, an overwhelming artillery fire that seems to blot out the sun. The sound of their shells, the high-pitched shriek followed by the earth-shattering impact, becomes the soundtrack to your days and nights. You feel your tank rock and shudder with each near miss, the concussion rattling your teeth. the air filled with the acrid smell of high explosives. You fire, reload, fire again, until your arms ache and your eyes blur. But still, they keep coming. It is a war of attrition on a scale that strips away all romantic notions of combat, leaving only a grim, exhausting struggle for survival. Adding to the torment is the infamous Rasputitsa, the seasonal mud that turns the vast Russian plains into an impassable quagmire. When the snow melts or the rains come, the ground transforms into a thick, viscous goo, sometimes several feet deep. Your tank, weighing many tons, sinks into it, becoming bogged down, trapped. The tracks spin uselessly, churning the mud into a frothing, sucking bog. You dismount, pulling on heavy boots, and try to lay planks or logs, anything to gain traction, struggling against the heavy suction of the mud. It is back-breaking labor, often performed under enemy fire, exposed and vulnerable. The mud clings to everything, infiltrating your clothing, coating your weapons, caking your boots until they feel like lead weights. It is soul-crushing, sapping your morale, turning rapid advances into agonizing crawls, leaving your mighty tank vulnerable, a sitting duck in a sea of brown. The Eastern Front is a place where hope slowly dissipates, replaced by a profound weariness. The days blur into weeks, weeks into months, marked only by the shifting seasons of impossible cold and inescapable mud. You begin to understand that here, the enemy is not just the soldier in the opposing tank, but the vast, indifferent landscape itself. A land that seems to conspire with the enemy to defeat you. The cold seeps into your bones, the mud clings to your spirit, and the endless waves of attackers grind away at your resolve. You are caught in a vast, crushing machine, a piece of steel within a meat grinder, and the only certainty is the constant, chilling hum of your engine, a fragile heartbeat against the monstrous backdrop of the Eastern Front. Even in the numbing cold of the Eastern Front or the searing heat of Africa, there is one fear that eclipses all others, a terror that settles deep in your gut and tightens with every passing hour spent within the steel confines of your tank, the fear of fire. You are acutely aware of the vulnerability of your steel coffin. Your tank, for all its impressive armor, is essentially a mobile magazine, packed with highly volatile ammunition and gallons of gasoline. A single, well-placed penetration from an enemy shell could, in an instant, transform your formidable machine into a raging inferno. The grim euphemism whispered among crews, "brewing up," speaks volumes. It refers to the catastrophic explosion that occurs when a round penetrates the ammunition storage, igniting the propellant charges. The result is instantaneous and devastating. You have witnessed it. You've seen other Panzers, moments before vibrant and threatening, suddenly erupt in a blinding flash of orange and red, followed by a violent, concussive roar. A mushroom cloud of black smoke billows upwards, a silent scream against the sky, marking the spot where comrades, mere seconds before, were alive. The sight etches itself into your mind, a haunting image that plays on an endless loop in the quiet moments between engagements. The knowledge that your life, and the lives of your crewmates, hangs by such a thin thread, creates an unbearable tension. You know, from the chilling accounts of those who survived, that you would have only precious seconds to escape. Perhaps 3, maybe 5. If luck was truly on your side. That's all the time you get to unlatch the hatch, to squeeze through the narrow opening, to throw yourself clear of the conflagration before the internal inferno consumes everything. You practice it mentally. A grim drill unlatch, push, scramble. The thought is always there. A cold knot in your stomach, will you be fast enough? Will the hatch jam? Will you even know it's coming? The smell of smoke, even faint and distant, becomes a primal alarm, a wisp of burning oil from a minor engine issue, a distant fire on the battlefield, the acrid scent of propellant after your own gunfires. Each sensation brings with it a spike of adrenaline, a micro moment of terror. You imagine the roaring flames, the suffocating heat, the agonizing pain. The crew communicates in clipped, urgent tones, their eyes constantly scanning the interior, looking for any sign of trouble, any hint of smoke that isn't supposed to be there. There's a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in everyone's posture, a quiet tenseness that never truly dissipates. The fear of brewing up isn't just about your own death. It's about the manner of it. The idea of being trapped, of burning alive within this steel shell, is a uniquely horrific prospect. You remember the faces of those who didn't make it out, the ones whose tanks became their funeral pyres. You hear the stories, whispered in the hushed tones of the night, of the men who were incinerated, their screams unheard over the roar of the fire. This fear becomes a silent passenger, riding with you through every mile, every battle. It is the unblinking eye of dread that watches over your shoulder, a constant, chilling reminder that your powerful armored vehicle is, ultimately, a highly flammable trap. And as you peer through your periscope, watching the distant flicker of muzzle flashes, you pray that today it will be another tank, not yours, that blooms into a fiery, smoke-filled silhouette against the indifferent sky. The quiet hum of the engine, usually a comfort, now feels like the prelude to a terrifying song, a song of fire and farewell. The vast, open plains of the Eastern Front or the sweeping dunes of the desert can, in an instant, transform into a claustrophobic nightmare of close-quarters combat. When the battle closes in, when the enemy infantry swarms your tank, your steel cocoon becomes a trap. The world outside, once a distant landscape viewed through a narrow slit, is now terrifyingly intimate. You hear the scuff of boots, the low murmur of voices, the frantic shouts, sounds that should be impossible to hear over the roar of your engine. Yet they pierce the thick steel, sending a shiver down your spine. Soviet infantry, particularly, develop ingenious and terrifying methods for close-quarters tank killing. You learn to dread the sight of a lone figure, perhaps with a satchel, or worse, a bottle. Molotov cocktails, crude but devastating, become a persistent threat. You hear the sharp crack of the glass bottle as it shatters on your armor, followed by the terrifying whoosh of ignited gasoline, flames licking at the steel, threatening to seep into the ventilation system. Your machine guns try to sweep them away, but their agility and daring are often surprising. Anti-tank rifles, despite their limitations, can damage tracks or optics, turning your tank blind and immobile. And then there are magnetic mines, silent and deadly, placed directly onto your hull by brave, desperate soldiers who vanish back into the smoke before you can even react. The inherent design of German tanks, for all their combat prowess, has critical vulnerabilities in close range. Your vision, limited by periscopes and observation slits, creates blind spots, large areas directly around and beneath the tank that you simply cannot see. Enemy troops, knowing this, exploit these blind spots with ruthless efficiency. They sprint into the dead zones, pressing themselves against your hull, planting charges, or preparing their incendiary devices, unseen and unheard by the crew within. You feel the dull thud against the side, the sudden jolt of a magnetic mine attaching, or the sickening sensation of a man climbing onto your engine deck. It is a terrifying dance of cat and mouse, where the mouse holds the ultimate weapon. Your tank commander, usually a calm voice of authority, faces an even greater personal risk. To gain vital situational awareness, to see the infantry swarming, to direct your machine gunners effectively, he must often expose himself. He unlatches his cupola hatch, pushing his head and shoulders out into the open air, a tempting target for enemy snipers. You hear the crack of their rifles, the whiz of bullets passing dangerously close to his head. Every time he does it, you hold your breath, knowing that one well-aimed shot could cost you your leader, leaving your tank disoriented and vulnerable. It is a testament to their courage, or perhaps their desperation, that they choose this calculated risk, day after day. Urban battles are the most unforgiving environments of all. The narrow streets, the rubble-strewn alleys, the multi-story buildings. They transform your mighty tank into a lumbering steel trap. There is no room to maneuver, no space to turn your massive turret quickly enough to counter threats from all directions. Every window becomes a potential sniper nest, every doorway a hiding place for a soldier with a mine or a Molotov. The cacophony of echoes from your own gun, mixed with the sharp reports of enemy weapons, ricochets through the confined space, disorienting you. You feel the grinding of your tracks against broken masonry, the sickening crunch of debris under your armored belly. A street can become a gauntlet, each block a potential ambush. Your tank, designed for the wide-open spaces of Blitzkrieg, is stifled and suffocated in the close-quarters labyrinth of a city, a steel beast brought to bay, fighting for its life in a cruel, unyielding cage. The sense of invulnerability, once so potent, dissolves completely in the face of these intimate, brutal encounters, replaced by a profound sense of entrapment, of being hunted within your own mighty machine. Beyond the relentless onslaught of the enemy, the crushing weight of climate, and the terrifying prospect of fire, there is another insidious danger within your steel world: the tank itself. Your armored vehicle, a marvel of engineering, is also a tightly packed machine of immense power and dangerous, unforgiving parts. Every movement, every operation, carries an inherent risk, a constant reminder of the mechanical beast you inhabit. The compartment is incredibly cramped, a brutal contrast to the wide-open world outside. 4 or 5 men, each performing a vital, distinct role, are squeezed into a space barely larger than a small car. You are constantly brushing against cold, unforgiving metal, your limbs always aware of the proximity of powerful, moving components. The breech of the main gun, a massive chunk of steel, slides back with incredible force and speed after each shot, ejecting a spent casing with a sharp clang. An arm or a leg in the wrong place for even a split second could be crushed or severed. The turret, driven by hydraulic power, pivots silently, swiftly. A moment of inattention, a miscommunication, and a crewmate could be pinned against the hull, caught between tons of unforgiving steel. You learn to move with a precise, almost choreographed rhythm, each man aware of the other's positions, relying on unspoken cues and the well-rehearsed dance of the crew. Hydraulic fluid, vital for the turret and sometimes other systems, can leak. The thick, oily liquid, often under immense pressure, might spray into the confined space, coating surfaces, making them slick and treacherous. A broken line means loss of power, a jammed turret, and the acrid smell of the fluid filling the air. Small leaks are a constant nuisance, a greasy film that coats your hands and equipment, a subtle sign of the machine's inherent imperfections. Larger leaks are a critical emergency, turning your tank into a temporary death trap, blind and unable to fight effectively. Mechanical failures are another ever-present threat, amplified by the immense stress of combat. The complex gearbox, especially under the strain of continuous operation over rough terrain, can seize or break. In the later stages of the war, as experienced drivers become casualties and training time is severely cut from 16 weeks to as little as 4 inexperienced young men are thrown into the cockpit. Their less refined driving techniques, their lack of a subtle touch with the controls, put enormous strain on the already overburdened mechanics. A grinding sound from the transmission, a sudden lurch that isn't from the terrain, can signal a complete breakdown, leaving your tank stranded, a hulking target. You might hear the exasperated curses of your driver as he wrestles with a stubborn gear, knowing that a single mechanical failure can be as deadly as an enemy's shell. And then there are the smells, the pervasive, almost suffocating symphony of the tank's internal workings. After every shot, a fresh wave of cordite, sharp and acrid, fills the air, mingling with the heavy, metallic tang of gunpowder. This mixes with the pervasive scent of diesel fuel, thick and cloying, and the ever-present aroma of hot oil. A greasy, metallic perfume that clings to your clothing, your skin, your hair. These smells are the very breath of the machine, but they are also a constant reminder of the combustible, dangerous environment you inhabit. They permeate everything, a distinct odor that will forever be associated with your time inside the steel. The dangers within your tank are not as dramatic as an enemy's shell, but they are constant, insidious, and just as capable of turning your mighty war machine into a crippled, vulnerable coffin. You are always aware of this internal adversary, the machine itself, a silent partner in your struggle for survival, equally capable of both protecting and harming you. The relentless nature of tank warfare strips away the last vestiges of normalcy, replacing them with an unending grind of physical and mental exhaustion. Days bleed into weeks, and weeks into months, without the luxury of proper rest or basic human comforts. You exist in a perpetual state of grime and weariness. Your uniform, once crisp, now a stiff, filthy second skin. You wear the same clothes for days on end, sometimes for weeks, caked with dust, sweat, and the pervasive smells of fuel and cordite. There is no time for washing, no opportunity for a change of clothes. The itch of dried sweat, the stiffness of the fabric, becomes a dull, constant ache. Sleep, when it comes, is often a fitful, shallow affair. If retreat is not possible, or if you are holding a defensive position, your tank becomes your makeshift home. You curl up in your seat, or on the cold, hard floor of the compartment, finding what little space you can. The drone of the engine, though sometimes off, is replaced by the creaks and groans of the cooling metal, or the distant sounds of the battlefield. The cold seeps in, or the heat presses down. You are always on edge, always listening, your body perpetually braced for the sudden jolt of an alarm, the urgent shout that signals another attack. Deep, restorative sleep becomes a forgotten luxury, replaced by a half-conscious state of restless waiting. Basic hygiene is almost impossible to maintain. Personal necessities are handled with grim improvisation. Buckets or discarded ammunition boxes serve as crude, temporary latrines, often emptied only during brief pauses, if at all. The pervasive stench of bodily odors mingles with the industrial smells of the tank, creating an almost unbearable atmosphere in the confined space. Cleanliness, once a given, becomes a forgotten concept, a relic of a different life. Rations are often meager, unappetizing, and eaten on the move. Sometimes, you cook on the tank's engine, carefully placing tins of food on the hot engine deck, hoping the residual heat will warm your meal. The taste of dust and exhaust often contaminates whatever you manage to prepare. It is a stark diet, barely enough to sustain the enormous physical demands of operating and fighting in a tank. Every calorie is a precious resource, stretched to its limit. But more insidious than the physical discomfort is the mental toll. The constant alertness, the unending tension, wears down your spirit. Every shell that screams past, every distant explosion, every sudden lurch of the tank sends a jolt of adrenaline through your system. You are perpetually waiting for that one shell, the one with your name on it, the one that will punch through the armor and end everything. This waiting, this constant, low-grade fear, is perhaps the most exhausting aspect of all. It gnaws at your nerves, blurring the line between reality and hallucination during the snatched moments of sleep. You might find yourself flinching at sudden, ordinary sounds, or interpreting shadows as threats. The camaraderie with your crew, a bond forged in shared danger, is a powerful antidote, a quiet understanding that helps you shoulder the immense burden. But even that bond cannot fully erase the deep, persistent weariness that settles into your very bones, a profound exhaustion that speaks of the relentless, unforgiving nature of your existence within the steel beast. The quiet moments, when the engine is off and the world is briefly still, are not peaceful. They are simply empty, filled only with the echoes of battles past and the anticipation of battles yet to come. As the war grinds on, the earlier sense of mechanical superiority begins to erode, replaced by a bitter reality of diminishing returns. You feel the decline in the very fabric of your tank, in the quality of its components. The familiar thrum of the engine is sometimes accompanied by new, unsettling sounds. The steel road wheels, once quiet and efficient, now begin to squeak and groan, a plaintive sound that hints at stress and wear. You learn that the alloys used for armor are becoming brittle, the quality diminished by wartime shortages, making your steel shell less resilient than it once was. Each impact, each clang, brings with it a deeper dread, knowing the protective shell around you is no longer as formidable as it once was. The relentless pace of combat, combined with the desperate need for repairs and replacements, leads to a grim new practice cannibalization. When a tank is damaged beyond immediate repair, or if it simply breaks down beyond recovery in the field, it becomes a donor. You participate in it yourself, often under the constant threat of enemy fire, carefully stripping essential parts, engines, tracks, transmissions, gun breeches, from a crippled comrade to bring another tank back to life. It's a macabre dance, a necessary barbarism that highlights the dwindling resources, the desperate scramble to keep the Panzer arm fighting. Each salvaged part is a testament to the growing scarcity, a chilling reminder that the once mighty industrial machine is faltering. Perhaps the most heartbreaking change, however, is in the quality of the new crews arriving at the front. The veteran tankers, the ones you learned from and fought alongside, are fewer and fewer. Their places are taken by fresh recruits, boys barely out of school, their faces still soft, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and forced bravado. Their training time, once a rigorous 16 weeks, has been slashed to a mere 4 weeks, sometimes even less. They are thrown into the crucible of the Eastern Front, almost completely unprepared for the brutal realities of tank warfare. You see their fumbling movements, their uncertain commands, their shocked expressions when the first shell lands nearby. You try to teach them, to guide them, but there is so little time, and the lessons of the battlefield are unforgiving. The grim statistics become a silent, crushing weight. The life expectancy for a Panzer crew on the Eastern Front, once measured in months, shrinks to a terrifyingly short 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That's all the time a new crew might have from the moment they arrive at the front until their tank is destroyed, or they themselves are killed or wounded. This knowledge seeps into your bones, a cold, hard truth that underlies every action, every decision. You watch new faces arrive, then disappear. A revolving door of youth and despair. The camaraderie, though still present, is tinged with a profound sadness, a constant farewell to those you barely had time to know. The once unbreakable spearhead of Blitzkrieg is slowly, irrevocably, crumbling. The once mighty roar of the Panzer now sounds tired, its movements less fluid. The sense of being part of an elite, invincible force is replaced by the grim determination of fighting a rearguard action, a desperate defense. You are acutely aware of the weakening armor, the faltering mechanics, and the dwindling pool of experienced comrades. The war, which once seemed to promise swift victory, now feels like a slow, agonizing descent into attrition. And you, inside your increasingly fragile steel box, are living through its agonizing final act, surrounded by the echoes of what once was and the chilling certainty of what is to come. As the war draws to its inevitable, crushing conclusion, the roar of the engines slowly fades, replaced by a quiet, pervasive silence. For those who survived, the transition from the deafening cacophony of battle to the eerie stillness of peace is a jarring, disorienting experience. You carry within you a paradox, a profound duality that will define the rest of your days. On one hand, there was the immense pride, the undeniable sense of belonging to an elite, formidable force. To be a German tanker was to be at the forefront of the most modern warfare, a part of the iron fist that reshaped the early landscapes of war. There was the camaraderie, the intense, unspoken bond forged in the crucible of shared danger, a kinship with men who saw you at your most vulnerable, who relied on you as you relied on them. Those bonds, those shared moments of terror and triumph, remain etched in your memory, a testament to the extraordinary human spirit under duress. But alongside that pride, and often overshadowing it, is the profound dread. The memories of the burning coffins, of the frozen wasteland, of the claustrophobic urban death traps, cling to you like a shroud. You recall the suffocating smell of cordite, the chilling sound of incoming shells, the heart-stopping jolt of impact. You remember the faces of those who perished, their youthful lives extinguished in a flash of fire or a hail of steel. The paradox of the Panzer becomes your own personal truth. It was a symbol of dominance, a machine of fearsome power. But it was also a mobile death trap, a steel maw that consumed lives with ruthless efficiency. In the post-war years, as the world slowly rebuilds and tries to make sense of the devastation, you, like other surviving tankers, reflect on your experiences. You carry the invisible scars, the quiet knowledge of what it meant to live, and perhaps to die, inside that steel box. You might gather with former comrades, perhaps over a quiet drink, and share stories. The horrors softened by the passage of time, the comradeship deepened by memory. You talk about the impossible cold, the relentless heat, the sheer physical and mental endurance required simply to survive. There's a quiet recognition in their eyes, a shared understanding that no one else can truly grasp. But then comes the deeper, more profound questioning. Was the sacrifice worth it, all the terror, the exhaustion, the loss? Was it justified by the mechanized glory, by the swift, terrifying advances that characterized the early war? You consider the lives lost, the cities pulverized, the landscapes scarred. You think of the machine, the Panzer, which was meant to bring victory, but ultimately brought only ruin and unimaginable suffering. It was a weapon, yes, but also a cage, a crucible, and for so many, a tomb. The sun begins to set now, casting long shadows across the quiet landscape. The sounds of birds chirping replace the distant rumble of engines. The air carries the scent of damp earth and growing things, not fuel and cordite. You are no longer in that steel box, but the echoes of its presence will forever resonate within you. The experience of being a German tanker in World War II, a fleeting moment in history, leaves an indelible mark. It is a story of human endurance, of the terrifying power of machines, and of the profound, often quiet, tragedy of conflict. And as the last light of day fades, you are left with the lingering, unanswerable question, a whispered thought carried on the evening breeze. What was it all for? What was the true cost of that mechanized glory? And what, if anything, remains? The wind whispers through the trees, carrying no answers, only the soft, persistent murmur of a world that remembers, even when it tries to forget. Our journey begins in the hushed annals of a tumultuous era, a time when the world was gripped by the relentless gears of conflict. Yet, even amidst the thunderous roar of battle, there existed moments, quiet and profound, that shaped the very perception of power. In this particular quiet corner of history, a name emerges, whispered with awe by some, and with a chill of dread by others, the Tiger Way. This was not merely a tank. In public imagination and propaganda, it was an icon, a symbol of German armored might, a seemingly impenetrable fortress on treads. Its very silhouette, heavy and angular, suggested an unyielding force, a mechanical titan born from the very earth itself. But beneath this polished, almost mythical facade, lay a deeper, more somber reality, especially for the often very young men tasked with operating these metallic giants. As we gently peel back the layers of legend, a central and poignant question arises, one that casts a long shadow over the Tiger's fearsome reputation. Why did a tank, so widely heralded as invincible, ultimately contribute to the demise of so many of its own operators? Why did this marvel of engineering, designed to dominate, so often entrap its own crews in a web of peril? far removed from direct engagements with the enemy. The Tiger I made its initial, imposing debut in the late summer of 1942, rolling onto the desolate, marshy landscapes near Leningrad, its colossal weight pressing deep into the soggy ground. Shortly thereafter, its distinctive profile appeared under the unforgiving glare of the North African sun, casting long, menacing shadows across endless sand dunes. Its very presence was a statement, a tangible manifestation of a new, formidable challenge. The immediate reactions from the Allied forces, the battle-hardened Soviets, the stoic British, and the rapidly deploying Americans were remarkably consistent. There was a palpable sense of shock, an almost disbelieving confusion, as reports filtered back from the front lines. Enemy shells, previously sufficient to halt any armored threat, seemed to simply ricochet off the Tiger's thick hide with an unsettling clink, or explode harmlessly, leaving only a dark smudge on its steel. The air, already thick with the acrid scent of cordite and dust, became tinged with the scent of bewildered despair for those facing this new, seemingly unbreakable foe. Whispers spread like wildfire through the trenches, and across the desolate plains, a new beast had been unleashed. A monster of steel that defied conventional understanding. The legend began to forge itself in these early, terrifying encounters, cementing the Tiger's place as an almost mythical entity, a harbinger of insurmountable power. Yet, as we shall see, within this very power lay the seeds of its own crew's quiet despair. To truly understand the formidable, yet ultimately tragic, story of the Tiger WWII, we must turn our gaze back to the crucible from which it emerged. The year was 1941, and the German war machine, previously thought unstoppable, was poised on the brink of its most ambitious and ultimately disastrous undertaking, Operation Barbarossa, the massive invasion of the Soviet Union. The initial thrust was swift, devastatingly effective. But as German armies pushed deeper into the vast, unforgiving expanses of the Eastern Front, they encountered an unexpected and profoundly unsettling revelation. Their trusted workhorses, the Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks, formidable machines in their own right, suddenly found themselves outclassed, outmatched, and often overwhelmed by two new Soviet designs, the agile and robust T-34 and the truly colossal KV-1 heavy tank. These Soviet machines, with their sloped armor and powerful guns, were a brutal awakening. German shells, designed to penetrate the thinner armor of Western tanks, often bounced harmlessly off the T-34's angled surfaces, while the KV-1 seemed to absorb hit after hit with an almost disdainful shrug. The shock among German tank crews and high command was profound, a chilling realization that their technological superiority was not as absolute as they had once believed. It wasn't just the quality of these Soviet tanks that stunned them. It was the sheer, overwhelming quantity. The seemingly endless waves of these resilient machines were a psychological blow, a stark contrast to the swift, decisive victories of the Western campaigns. From this crucible of shock and desperate necessity, an urgent and undeniable demand arose. Germany needed a new heavy tank, one that could not only match but decisively overcome these formidable Soviet adversaries. The urgency was palpable, a quiet hum of anxiety permeating the highest echelons of military planning. Several designs were put forth, their blueprints meticulously studied, their potential weighed against the harsh realities of the Eastern Front. In the end, it was the robust and imposing proposal from Henschel and Son that was ultimately chosen. And thus, from silent drawing boards and the urgent whispers of desperate engineers, the Panzer VI, soon to be known simply as the Tiger, was born. The Führer, captivated by the promise of this new, powerful weapon, quickly issued an ambitious order. 500 units were to be produced. This was a monumental undertaking, a testament to the immense resources and industrial might that Germany could still muster. Yet, even with such fervent desire and concerted effort, the grinding realities of war, strategic bombing, and the ever-increasing demands on dwindling resources meant that this ambitious target would never be fully realized. In the end, just over 1/300 of these magnificent, yet burdened, machines would ever roll off the assembly lines. Each one, a testament to engineering prowess, but also a silent harbinger of the immense cost, both mechanical and human, that its very existence would incur. The stage was set for its entry into a world desperate for a turning point. And the Tiger I arrived with a quiet, powerful rumble, ready to fulfill its destiny, for better or for worse. The birth of the Tiger, I was shrouded in a cloak of almost impenetrable secrecy, a testament to its strategic importance in the desperate war effort. From the initial design sketches to the earliest rumblings of its mighty engine in trials, every aspect of its development was guarded with an intensity usually reserved for the most sensitive of state secrets. The hope was that its sudden appearance on the battlefield would unleash not only devastating firepower, but also a profound psychological shock on the enemy, amplifying its already formidable presence. Yet, even the most meticulously guarded secrets have a way of whispering through the fabric of conflict. Before the grand unveiling of the Tiger I in its full operational capacity at the Battle of Kursk, a significant incident subtly began to unravel this carefully constructed veil. In the chilling depths of the Russian winter, a disabled Tiger, perhaps mired in deep snows or suffering a mechanical failure far from recovery efforts, fell into Soviet hands. This was a moment of immense strategic value for the Red Army, a quiet, almost surgical opportunity. Imagine the scene: the hulking, silent form of the Tiger, stark against the white, frozen landscape, its powerful engine now eerily still. Soviet engineers and intelligence officers, their breaths frosting in the frigid air, descended upon it. With painstaking care, they began to dissect its secrets, its armor thickness, its internal mechanisms, its formidable gun. They probed for weaknesses, meticulously charting every detail, transforming a captured behemoth into a blueprint for its own eventual downfall. This captured Tiger became a quiet classroom, its metallic shell yielding invaluable lessons that would later be used against its brethren. Despite this early compromise, when the Tiger I finally entered combat in earnest, particularly on the vast, often featureless plains of the Eastern Front, its initial impressions were nothing short of shattering. Its 88mm KODU K36L56 gun, a truly magnificent piece of ordnance, possessed a reach and destructive capability far surpassing any previous German tank weapon. Imagine the quiet tension of the battlefield, the distant rumble of enemy tanks, and then, from an almost impossibly far distance, the sudden, sharp crack of the Tiger's main gun, its shells, traveling with incredible velocity, could punch through the armor of most Soviet tanks from ranges exceeding a mile, a distance at which the enemy could not even hope to return effective fire. This terrifying asymmetry created an almost immediate sense of psychological dominance. Enemy tank commanders, peering through their periscopes, would suddenly see their comrades' vehicles erupt in flames, or their armor violently breached, without any clear understanding of where the attack originated. The air would fill with the acrid scent of burning fuel and the metallic shriek of rending steel. A symphony of destruction played from beyond the horizon. Early combat reports painted a picture of unbridled power, of a machine that could engage and destroy opponents from distances previously unimaginable, turning the battlefield into a terrifying one-sided hunt. The legend, born from propaganda, now found its brutal confirmation in the very dust and smoke of battle, cementing the Tiger WWII's reputation as a truly formidable, if silently flawed, predator. After the initial, disheartening trials and the quiet lessons gleaned from repeated mechanical failures, German command embarked on a painstaking period of reorganization and adaptation. Engineers worked tirelessly, often under immense pressure, to address the most glaring deficiencies in the Tiger's complex systems. They focused on refining the transmission, strengthening key components, and developing better operational guidelines for its crews. Logistics chains, too, were scrutinized and adjusted, however imperfectly, to better support these heavy behemoths. This was a period of learning, of quiet adjustments and determined improvements, carried out far from the immediate roar of the front lines, yet driven by the urgent need for a truly effective heavy tank. It was in the bitter cold and swirling snows of early 1943, during the Third Battle of Kharkov, that the Tiger WWII truly came into its own, unleashed in greater numbers and with more refined tactics. The desolate, frozen landscapes around Kharkov became the crucible for its first true triumph. Imagine the vast, snow-covered plains, silent save for the biting wind, suddenly broken by the deep, guttural rumble of dozens of Tiger tanks. Their distinctive, heavy silhouettes, previously seen only in isolated, troubled deployments, now moved with a coordinated, ominous presence. This was the first real, devastating demonstration of their full power. A brutal ballet of steel and fire that would forever etch the Tiger's fearsome reputation into the annals of the Eastern Front. The Tiger's 88-millimeter gun, firing with terrifying accuracy, annihilated Soviet armor from distances that left the enemy utterly bewildered and defenseless. Accounts from the battle describe how Soviet tanks, their crews brave but outmatched, were systematically picked off before they could even get within effective firing range. The air would be filled with the chilling whistle of incoming shells, followed by the blinding flash and deafening explosion as yet another T-34 or KV-1 succumbed to the Tiger's devastating precision. The scent of cordite and burning metal hung heavy over the snow-laden fields, a grim testament to the overwhelming power unleashed. Red Army losses mounted at an alarming rate, their desperate counterattacks often dissolving under the Tiger's relentless, long-range fire. The morale of Soviet tank crews, already strained by the immense pressures of the war, was profoundly shaken by the appearance of this seemingly impervious foe. The quiet dread that the Tiger had inspired in its isolated early appearances now solidified into widespread fear and respect across the vast expanse of the Eastern Front. It was here, amidst the frozen forests and shattered villages of Kharkov, that the Tiger WWII earned its legendary status, not from propaganda alone, but from the grim, undeniable reality of its devastating effectiveness on the battlefield. Its roaring cannon became a symbol of German resilience, a quiet, terrible promise of destruction that resonated across thousands of miles of bitter conflict. While the Eastern Front bore the brunt of the Tiger WWII's initial, terrifying impact, the Western Allies were not left entirely in the dark regarding this new, formidable threat. Bits and pieces of information, like scattered leaves in a rising wind, began to filter through to their intelligence services. Soviet reports, often filled with a mixture of awe and dread, detailed the Tiger's impenetrable armor and crushing firepower. These were supplemented by diligently intercepted German communications, quiet whispers caught on the airwaves that spoke of a new, heavy tank, a Panzer VI, turning the tide in some engagements. Initially, there was a quiet period of confusion, a struggle to differentiate between the various new German armored designs. The impressive, if lighter, Panzer V. Panther, with its sloped armor and long gun, was often mistaken for the heavier Panzer VI Tiger, leading to early misinterpretations of their capabilities. The air was thick with speculation, with intelligence officers poring over grainy photographs and coded messages, trying to piece together the true nature of this emerging mechanical beast. The Western Allies finally encountered the beast themselves in the unforgiving crucible of North Africa, a land of shifting sands and brutal heat. It was here, under the cunning command of General Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, that the first Tiger tanks rolled into direct confrontation with British and American forces. Imagine the quiet apprehension that must have spread through Allied lines as the reports began to trickle in, shells bouncing off a new, massive tank, its powerful gun picking off their own vehicles with chilling ease from extreme distances. The initial shock was palpable, a stark and immediate realization that the qualitative advantage their forces sometimes held was now being seriously challenged. The sound of shells hitting that thick armor, only to splinter harmlessly, must have been a profoundly unsettling sound in the vast, echoing silence of the desert. Perhaps the most significant turning point for the Allies in understanding the Tiger's vulnerabilities came in a quiet, almost miraculous event, the capture of Tiger 131 in Tunisia, almost entirely intact. On a quiet morning, amidst the dust and distant gunfire, this magnificent machine, perhaps suffering a mechanical failure or a lucky shot to a weak point, was abandoned by its crew and fell into British hands. This was a moment of immense strategic fortune. A whispered prayer answered. Imagine the meticulous process that followed. British engineers and ordnance experts, with a quiet intensity, swarmed over the captured tank. They ran their hands over its thick armor, climbed into its spacious interior, examined its powerful 88mm gun, and carefully studied its engine and transmission. Every inch of its formidable structure was measured, photographed, and analyzed. This captured behemoth became a living textbook, its silent steel revealing invaluable secrets about its strengths. Yes, but more importantly, about its fatal flaws. This intimate encounter with Tiger 131 provided the Allies with the detailed knowledge they desperately needed to devise effective tactics against it, transforming a symbol of fear into a studied, understood, and ultimately conquerable adversary. The quiet hum of its captured engine, once a sound of dread, now sang a different tune, a song of intelligence and impending strategic advantage. The Tiger WWII's most defining characteristic, the very heart of its formidable reputation, was its armor. Thick, flat plates of steel, meticulously welded together, enveloped the crew and vital components in a formidable shell. In the early stages of the war, this prodigious protection rendered the Tiger virtually impervious to most anti-tank weapons then in service. Imagine a German Tiger rolling slowly across a field, absorbing direct hits from smaller caliber anti-tank guns, the shells simply striking its unyielding surface with a dull thud, or screeching off in a shower of sparks, leaving little more than a smudge. For the crew inside, this must have imparted a profound sense of security. a feeling of being cocooned within an unbreakable fortress. The spacious interior, a stark contrast to the cramped confines of many contemporary tanks, further added to this sense of comfort, allowing ample room for ammunition, fuel, and the crew to operate with a degree of ease. However, this very design, while initially a profound strength, also harbored significant, quiet drawbacks that would become increasingly apparent as the war progressed. The flat armor plates, while thick, presented a less effective defense against the increasingly powerful and sophisticated anti-tank weaponry developed by the Allies from 1944 onwards. Unlike sloped armor, which could deflect incoming shells with a glancing blow, flat plates absorbed the full force of a direct impact, eventually succumbing to the sheer kinetic energy of heavier rounds. The constant, quiet arms race meant that what was once impregnable became merely resistant, and then, slowly, vulnerable. A more insidious and truly deadly flaw emerged in the later stages of the war, a silent betrayal from within the very material of the tank itself. As resources dwindled and Allied bombing campaigns intensified, Germany faced severe shortages of crucial alloys, most notably manganese. This vital element was essential for creating steel that was tough, ductile, and resistant to shattering upon impact. The absence of sufficient manganese in later production runs of Tiger armor led to a terrifying consequence: the armor became increasingly brittle. When a high-velocity shell struck these brittle plates, instead of merely being penetrated, the armor would often shatter, sending a lethal shower of jagged, superheated metal fragments, known chillingly as spall, ricocheting violently around the interior of the tank. Imagine the horror the outside armor might hold. But the inside became a death trap of flying shrapnel, silently maiming or killing the crew without the shell even fully penetrating. The very protection became a source of silent terror. Further design flaws added to the Tiger's quiet vulnerabilities. The shot traps in the mantlet design, the curved steel shield protecting the gun, were a particularly dangerous oversight. An incoming shell, instead of deflecting harmlessly, could strike the mantlet and be deflected downwards, directly into the thinner roof armor of the hull, or upwards into the turret ring, with devastating consequences. And while the 88mm gun was immensely powerful, the turret, weighing an astonishing 11 tons, was ponderously slow to traverse. Even with a hydraulic system, it took a full minute for the massive turret to complete a full 360-degree rotation. In the lightning-fast chaos of a tank battle, this meant that agile enemy tanks could often outmaneuver the Tiger, quietly slip around its flanks, and deliver a fatal blow to its vulnerable sides or rear before the monstrous turret could even begin to bring its formidable gun to bear. The armor, once its greatest ally, slowly, silently, became a complex web of strengths and fatal weaknesses. As the war progressed, and the initial shock and confusion surrounding the Tiger, I began to subside. The Allied forces, with patient determination, shifted their focus from merely surviving its onslaught to actively hunting and destroying it. Quiet analysis of captured Tigers, combined with hard-won experience from countless battlefield encounters, allowed them to meticulously chart its vulnerabilities. The awe began to fade, replaced by a clear-eyed understanding of how to exploit the mighty beast's weaknesses. A particularly effective and increasingly prevalent tactic involved leveraging the Allies' growing air superiority. As the Luftwaffe, once the proud mistress of the skies, slowly but surely lost its dominance. The skies above the battlefields became increasingly populated by Allied fighter bombers. Aircraft like the American P-47 Thunderbolt and the British Hawker Typhoon, sleek and deadly, became the Tiger's silent predators from above. They discovered a critical, hidden vulnerability while the Tiger's side and frontal armor were incredibly thick. Its top armor, designed to be impervious to shrapnel and small arms fire, was comparatively thin. Imagine a P-47, its engine roaring. Swooping down from the sky, its pilots learned to target the vulnerable engine deck and turret roof, unleashing rockets and streams of heavy machine gun fire. The impact on this thinner armor was often catastrophic, igniting fuel, damaging the engine, or even piercing directly into the crew compartment. This shift in air superiority profoundly altered the landscape of armored warfare for the German forces. Once the skies were no longer a sanctuary, once the quiet hum of an approaching Allied fighter bomber became a common, terrifying sound. The fate of the Tigers, if spotted in the open, was often sealed. A lone Tiger, previously almost unchallengeable on the ground, became a slow, deliberate target for swift, diving aircraft. The open fields, once its domain, became potential death traps. The sight of its distinctive, heavy form from above, a dark cross against the landscape, signaled an almost inevitable attack. The sheer numerical superiority of Allied air power meant that once a Tiger was spotted, its chances of survival rapidly diminished. The rumble of its engine, once a sound of power, now sometimes became a silent magnet for deadly attention from the skies, turning the hunters into the hunted, changing the very rhythm of the battlefield. The silent watchers in the clouds had learned their prey's most secret weakness, and they exploited it with grim, relentless efficiency. Beyond the roar of battle and the clash of steel, a silent, relentless war was being waged against the Tiger WWII, the war of logistics and maintenance. Its colossal size and advanced design, while awe-inspiring, simultaneously became its Achilles heel in the long, grinding conflict. Each Tiger was, in essence, a hand-built machine, a testament to intricate craftsmanship rather than mass production standardization. This artisanal approach, while ensuring quality, came with a devastating drawback: poor interchangeability of parts. Imagine the quiet frustration of a repair crew in the field. A vital component breaks down, but the spare part, even if available, doesn't quite fit because it came from a different batch, or perhaps even a different factory. Each repair became a painstaking, time-consuming endeavor, often requiring custom fitting or improvisation, turning what should have been a swift fix into hours or even days of struggle under harsh conditions. Adding to these woes was the critical shortage of rubber, a material vital for the tank's running gear. As the war stretched on and resources became increasingly scarce, many Tiger tanks had to operate with some of their road wheels running bare metal on metal. Imagine the deafening, metallic shriek and clatter that must have accompanied these behemoths as they moved, transforming what should have been powerful, yet relatively muffled rumble into an unmistakable, ear-splitting racket. This not only damaged the components further, but also served as an audible beacon for enemy forces, turning the Tiger from a stealthy hunter into a loud, ponderous target. Its presence announced long before it was seen. The mighty Maybach engine, though powerful, also demanded delicate handling. Its RPM, or revolutions per minute, often had to be deliberately limited by the crews to prevent catastrophic damage to its fragile internal components, particularly the transmission. This protective measure, while necessary for the tank's longevity, had the unfortunate side effect of slowing the tank down further, reducing its already limited tactical mobility. The heavy machine, already deliberate in its movements, became even more so, its speed of deployment and response constrained by the very fragility of its heart. Furthermore, the relentless Allied bombing campaigns systematically targeted and destroyed Germany's rail infrastructure. This had a profound and quiet impact on the deployment of Tiger tanks. These immensely heavy machines were designed to be transported primarily by rail, which spared their delicate running gear and engines from excessive wear. But with rail lines severed and bridges destroyed, Tigers were often forced to drive long distances under their own power to reach the battlefronts. Imagine the sheer wear and tear on these sensitive machines, miles upon miles of arduous travel over rough terrain. Before they even encountered the enemy, each mile driven was a mile of accelerated degradation, a quiet countdown to inevitable mechanical failure. In the final, desperate years of the war, the quality of German military training suffered immensely. Veteran crews, often irreplaceable, had been decimated, replaced by young, often poorly trained recruits. These inexperienced crews, thrown into the cockpit of the complex Tiger, frequently lacked the nuanced understanding required to operate such a sophisticated machine with care. They mishandled transmissions, overstressed engines, and made tactical errors that led to their own tanks becoming damaged or bogged down, not by enemy fire, but by their own lack of experience. Many a formidable Tiger, designed to be a terror to its foes, quietly succumbed to the unintended, tragic consequences of its own crew's inexperience, left to be destroyed or captured, a silent monument to the dwindling resources and human cost of a losing war. As the final chapters of the Second World War unfolded, the once mighty roar of the Tiger began to fade, replaced by the grim realities of a collapsing war effort. Despite its fearsome reputation and undeniable battlefield prowess, the sheer numerical superiority of the Allied forces, coupled with Germany's rapidly dwindling resources, ensured that the Tiger, for all its power, could never fundamentally alter the outcome of the war. Its appearances became increasingly sporadic, its impact localized, no longer the widespread terror it had once been. In these desperate, final months, many Tiger tanks, these magnificent creations of steel and ingenuity, were sent into battle under increasingly untenable circumstances. They often lumbered forward without adequate strategic planning, their crews knowing they were venturing into a hopeless fight. Critically, they were frequently short on the very lifelines of their existence, ammunition and fuel. Imagine the quiet despair of a crew, sitting in their powerful machine, knowing they had only a handful of shells, or barely enough fuel to reach the objective, let alone return. The engine, once a symbol of power, now sometimes idled with a soft, mournful sigh, its fuel gauge dropping dangerously low even before the battle truly began. A truly poignant and somber statistic underscores the Tiger's fate. Over half of all Tiger WWII tanks produced were ultimately destroyed by their own crews. This was not an act of cowardice, but one born of grim necessity. When a Tiger became bogged down, critically damaged, or ran out of fuel or ammunition, and recovery was impossible, its crew faced a terrible choice. To abandon such a powerful weapon to the enemy was unthinkable, as its secrets could be further exploited. So, with heavy hearts, they would meticulously disable the gun, set charges to blow the engine, or simply ignite the fuel, transforming their formidable sanctuary into a pyre of smoke and twisted metal. Imagine the final, quiet moments, the crew meticulously preparing their steel home for destruction. The acrid scent of explosives in the air. The distant sound of enemy forces approaching. It was a silent, ritualistic sacrifice. A final act of defiance against a relentless tide, ensuring that their mechanical beast would never serve another master. The records, compiled after the quiet cessation of hostilities, painted a paradoxical picture. Approximately 1,300 Tiger WWII tanks were ever built, a relatively small number in the grand scheme of such a vast conflict. Yet, despite their limited numbers and numerous mechanical frailties, these titans were credited with an astonishing feat, an estimated 10,000 enemy tank kills. This ratio, nearly 8 enemy tanks destroyed for every Tiger built, speaks volumes about its effectiveness when it was operational, fully supplied, and skillfully handled. It truly was a devastating weapon. Yet, this remarkable killing power was ultimately insufficient. The Tiger, for all its individual might, was but a single, expensive, and fragile cog in a much larger, global conflict. Too few existed. Too many succumbed to mechanical breakdown. Too many were isolated by logistical nightmares. And too many were destroyed by their own crews to change the inexorable march of history. Its thunderous roar, once so terrifying, slowly faded into a quiet echo across the vast, scarred landscapes of Europe, a testament to both its formidable power and the ultimately insurmountable forces that brought it, and the war it fought in, to its quiet, inevitable end. And perhaps, somewhere in the fields where they once roamed, the silent rust of these great beasts still whispers the tale of their power and their profound, quiet cost.